Okay, babe. I think I'm gonna go now. I'll see you next week if the weather is nice. Love you, I said. It was indeed a beautiful day. 24 degrees, sunny, and a light southern breeze. I packed everything from our little picnic into a basket and put it in the trunk of my car, along with the lounge chair. I felt peaceful, serene, and yes, a little sad. That's what a visit to Kat has always done for me. I've been in love with her since we were each 12 years old, and will probably love her until the day I die. The first time I saw Kat, my then best friend Robert Bruce and I were playing ball in my front yard. She and her family were moving into the house next door that was for sale. It was the middle of the summer before second grade. I was 7 years old. Robert and I were casually glancing at the movers and the family that was moving into the house formerly owned by the Miller family when I noticed her. She was skinny, with long blonde braids and lots of freckles. Only later did I learn that she also had cerulean eyes. We watched her from the sidelines and tossed the ball back and forth for a while until she came up to her father and spoke to him, pointing at Robert and me. I saw her father nod his head, then she ran off into her house, reappeared a few seconds later with her own baseball glove and headed toward us. "Can I play too?" she asked, her smile exposing a row of uneven teeth. She introduced herself as Catherine McVeigh, Katie for her friends and Kat for her boyfriends. I saw Robert wrinkle his nose, but admittedly I was fascinated. I resisted Robert's decision, and we started playing ball with the three of us. She knew how to hold a glove, and just as importantly, she didn't throw like a girl. As far as I could tell, she was accepted, expanding our little group of friends to 4 people, one more being Jimmy Arthur. Although there were more than enough girls in our neighborhood for her to play with, Kat spent most of her time with the boys. She played baseball, kickball, war, and frisbee with us. I didn't see her spend much time with the girls, especially when the girls were playing dolls or dress-up. Gradually, Kat overtook Robert as my best friend. If I could only invite one friend to go somewhere with my family, I chose Kat. If I could stay overnight with one friend, I chose Kat. Kat's family was Catholic, but that didn't matter until she was confirmed when she turned 12. Confirmation is a very important event for religious Catholics, and there is usually a big party afterward. Like most of the girls being confirmed that day, Kat was wearing a white dress and white tights. Very unusually for her, her hair was loose. She'd had her braces removed from her teeth 2 weeks before, and she'd had a little makeup done. I was confused. I looked at Kat as if I'd never seen her before. She was, beautiful. My life would never be the same again. "What are you looking at, Julian? Shut your mouth or a fly will fly in," she said when she saw me staring at her. "Don't you dare say anything about that dress, or I'll smack you so hard you won't see anything for a week." I remember the whole party. I couldn't breathe or think. All us kids were told to behave, but I couldn't have behaved badly that night, even if my life depended on it. I was a vegetable. My heart was racing. I was sweating. If I were a 65-year-old man, I'd probably be rushed to the hospital thinking I was having a heart attack. I waited until the party was almost over and finally walked over to Kat, took her hand, and led her to a quiet place. "Hey, man, your palms are really sweaty," Kat said as we walked over. "What did you have to say to me that you couldn't say it in front of everyone?" You're beautiful, Kat," I stuttered, my heart thudding in my chest. I'm not sure I'd ever been hit so hard in my entire life until that moment. She punched me right in the mouth, parting my lower lip and knocking me to the ground. "You're a stupid asshole! Don't you ever talk to me again!" she hissed as she walked away. I lay on my back in the grass, wondering if she meant me. I don't know how long I lay like that, but the next thing I knew, Mom was helping me sit up and holding a tissue to my bloody lip. "Are you okay, Jewel?" she asked, calling me by a name that only my family had the courage to use. "What happened? Who hit you?" Kat. Kat hit me because I said she was pretty," I mumbled through my napkin. "You told her she was pretty and she hit you?" Mom asked with a giggle. I nodded, upset that Mom seemed to be laughing at the fact that Kat hit me. "Oh, son, you made a big mistake saying that to Catherine," she said, helping me slowly to my feet. "You'll probably need to apologize tomorrow. For now, let's go home." "But, Mother, why should I apologize? She's really pretty," I whimpered as we walked to our house next door. Yeah, weren't you on the floor with her yesterday playing World Wildlife Fund Superstars or something? And today you're telling her she's beautiful. Does Catherine look like the kind of girl you call beautiful? She asked. This was the first of many times in my life when I did not understand the fair sex. When I knocked on the door of the McVeigh house the next day, I was greeted with an understanding smile by Kat's mom. She's in the living room, Julian. Why don't you go into the kitchen and I'll send her in there so you two can be alone, she said. Walking into the kitchen, Kat grinned like a hyena. I knew she was very proud of herself for the blow she'd dealt me. My lip had swollen and turned a purple hue. I mumbled rather than spoke. I'm sorry, Kat. I shouldn't have said what I said, I muttered. Yeah, you shouldn't have, but I probably shouldn't have hit you either, she replied. My mom said you were actually being nice. When did you learn that? I shrugged. I guess my mom taught me that. Obviously, she was wrong. Okay, I won't tell anyone I busted your lip if you don't tell anyone you called me pretty, she said. It's a deal, I said enthusiastically, extending my hand to shake. But, Kat, you really were beautiful. Thank you, I guess, she whispered. I never told Kat she was beautiful again, at least not for the next few years, but I also never looked at her the same way again. She would never again be just Kat to me. One of the guys. It didn't help that Kat's breasts were starting to grow either. Suddenly, I wasn't the only one looking at Kat like that, and I have to admit I didn't like it one bit. I'd seemingly always thought of Kat as mine, and suddenly other boys seemed to appear out of nowhere to talk to her and flirt with her. To her credit, she didn't look like it affected her in any way, which at least gave me a little comfort. She was still my Kat, at least in my mind. Junior high school is a stronghold of teenage hormones, and our school was no different. I know my hormones were often on alert, but I knew I had to be careful. No way did I want Kat to hit me again. There were plenty of other attractive girls in my middle school, but I really had my eyes solely on Kat. The problem was that I seemed stuck being her friend because we had been close for so long. The other guys didn't have that problem and often approached her, and every time I got a little bit of a freeze inside. As I watched Kat very closely, I noticed that she wasn't quite like all the other girls. I mean, she's not a tomboy like she used to be, but she doesn't look like the rest of them either. Not that I'm complaining. In middle school, group dates were in vogue, although individual dates were starting to happen as well. Kat usually stayed with me during group dates and never agreed to individual ones, though I know she was invited. As for me, there were no other girls in Kat's attraction zone, so I didn't ask any other girls out on dates. The main social event of the year at our school was the spring dance for the 8th graders. Of course, I asked Kat to go with me and then tried to dodge, but she wouldn't budge and agreed. Kat was wearing a very pretty dress that I had never seen before, and I was wearing my Sunday suit. I thought we made a good couple. Both pairs of parents made sure to take lots of pictures. Before my dad drove us to school, her dad pulled me over to the curb and threatened to kill me if I dared touch his daughter the way my dad would not want my little sister to be touched. And that will be after she's beaten the living daylights out of you. Do you understand, Julian? Absolutely, Mr. McVeigh, I wheezed. We had a good time at the dance, danced together a few times, and stayed close for most of the event. She was asked to dance by a few other guys, but she turned them all down. I felt like King Kong. At the end of the evening, Dad drove us home. As I walked her to the door, my palms were sweating and my heart was pounding in my chest. It was the moment of truth. I had planned to kiss her goodnight, assuming she would say yes to my request. In no way did I plan to pounce on Kat with kisses. As Dad drove the car to our house, leaving us alone on the porch, I barked out my request for a kiss, surreptitiously watching her hands. She pondered for a few seconds, then nodded silently. I'd seen it done before in the movies, so I stepped toward her, wrapped my arms around her back, and kissed her, quite firmly, I thought, right on her warm, soft lips. She didn't move for the first few seconds and then returned the kiss, placing her hands on my shoulders. I was sure my brain had short-circuited for a while. When I regained my ability to think after a few seconds, I was shaking from head to toe when we separated. "Did you feel that?" I asked in a whisper. She looked at me as if I'd grown a second head before finally crushing my soul. "No, I didn't feel anything," she replied. "Should you have?" No, 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 it wasn't supposed to happen. James Bond had never gotten this corny when he kissed a woman. "Well, good night, Kat. I had a good time," I mumbled. "Yeah, me too," she said, before walking off to her house. Even though Kat and I hadn't met during my freshman year, we still chatted often, as we always had. After all, she was still my best friend. However, now spent more time than before with other girls. Admittedly, I was a bit puzzled, since she had never wanted to spend so much time with her peers before. I guess I should have known that sooner or later she would turn into an adult girl. Being the idiot I was, I hadn't even thought to ask Kat to be my date to the homecoming dance. I just assumed she knew we were going together. Apparently she didn't, because about 3 weeks before the prom, I found out that she had agreed to go on a date with a handsome young man named Chris Tambrin. Found out about this date when she mentioned it to me in passing. "But I thought we were going to the prom together," I whimpered. I could tell by the look on my face that she had surprised and hurt me. "I'm sorry, Julian," she said softly. "You didn't say anything to me, so I thought—" "I didn't think I should say anything. It's my fault. You know what the word assume means," I said. "I hope you have a good time." The walk to school the next morning began very quietly as Robert, Jimmy, Kat, and I traveled the half-mile distance to school. No one said anything until Robert asked if he and his date, Allie Forst, could ride to the prom with Kat and me. We looked at each other for a moment before Kat finally answered. We're not going to prom together. Chris Tambrin asked me to go with him." And I said yes, Kat said. "Oh," Jimmy said, and let out a low whistle. Robert patted me on the shoulder, and we continued on our way in silence. For the first time in my life, there was a rift in my relationship with Kat. For the next few weeks, we barely spoke to each other as she began spending almost all of her time with her girlfriends. 2 weeks before prom, my mom asked if I should take my suit to the dry cleaners. I realized why she was asking. I hadn't told her about Kat and Chris Tambrin. When I did, she stood there for a few seconds with her mouth hanging open. "I'm sorry, Jules," she said quietly. "I take it you're not going with anyone?" "Yeah," I wheezed back. I tried to pretend I didn't care when I saw Chris drive up to Kat's house to pick her up on dance night, but Mom and Dad weren't buying it. Chris is a handsome, good-looking blonde former starting point guard on our basketball team. He's 5'8", weighs 84, and has blue eyes. All the girls at school talked for 2 weeks about how lucky Kat was. Jimmy and I spent all night dancing at the bowling alley. Spent a fortune for 2 kids, playing 10 games each and eating 1 pizza for 2 in the gym. I was so out of my depth that Jimmy beat me in the overall score for the first time in his life. At least one of us had a good time. Kat and I spent the better part of 2 weeks avoiding each other. I don't know about her, but I was miserable. I didn't know how to get out of the impasse, though I wasn't sure I should care. 2 days later, I was sitting in my room staring at the ceiling when my mom brought Kat in. "Someone needs to talk to you, Jewel, and you need to listen," Mom said. I guess it was Mom and Kat who talked first. Mom had a complacent smile on her face, and Kat looked like she was ready to cry. "I'm sorry, Julian. I probably shouldn't have gone out with him without consulting you. I knew you assumed we'd go to the prom together," she said. "Well, yeah, about that," I replied. "I should have suggested it. My mom gave me a big scolding for that. I'm a dumbass." She still had tears in her eyes. I finally realized that this was about more than just a date. "Julian, can we have a serious talk? I mean, like, for real, like, life and death, maybe? I really, really need to talk to someone, and I think that person should be you. Can you just listen to me without being judgmental or angry? I really, really need you right now, Julian." "Okay, Kat. I've always been yours," I replied. "You talk, I listen. Whatever it is, we can work it out together." She hugged me tightly and cried. I gave her a few moments to let the tears out, then pulled away from me and looked into her eyes. "Come on," I whispered. "Remember when we were kissing and you asked me if I felt it and I said I didn't?" She began. "Well, I had questions, and I was wondering—" Was it you or me? So I decided to try dating another guy and see if I felt it with him or not. You kissed Chris. I interrupted, but was quickly silenced when she pointed at me and made a mad grimace. Again, I didn't feel anything, but he did when he grabbed my breasts a few minutes later. I kicked him hard in the balls and he threw up. He kept his distance from me for about an hour until we left early, she explained. I started to speak again, but she stopped me with an icy stare. Okay, now comes the hard part, she continued. I was worried, actually, about some feelings I've had for a few girls over the last year or so. Thought I might be a lesbian. When I didn't feel anything when kissing you or Chris, the picture became clearer. And when I kissed Kendra Rizzi in the library 2 days ago, everything fell into place. Tears streamed from her eyes, and I sat on the bed, speechless. Say something, you asshole, she yelled at me. I was waiting for you to let me talk, I snarled. She looked at me again and then shrugged. I decided it was my turn to talk. You made out with Kendra Rizzi? Wow, I'd like to do that myself, I said. Is that all you have to say? Really? She commented. Wait, I thought you liked me. I do like you, and you know it. So is that kiss with Kendra? Is it just a kiss, or is there something going on between you two? I asked. She looked guilty and confused. I really don't know. But that's only half the story, Julian. You know what I mean? Yeah, I do, I said. It sounds like you've got a lot of thinking. But whatever you decide, I'm here for you. I'll always be here for you, Kat. Always. She lowered herself onto the bed next to where I was sitting and tried to crack my ribs by hugging me. So you won't hate me? She sobbed into my shoulder. I can't, even if I try. If only you can bear to have me love you from a distance for the rest of our lives, I said. She hugged me again. I hugged her back. I was sure I was the first person she had told about her decision, though I had a hunch that she would eventually tell others as well. We never discussed it when others were around. I knew she was afraid of exposure. I know that later in her high school years, she dated a few other girls, but for the most part, I was a cover for her. Whenever there was an important event or party going on, I was her date. I was safe and we maintained a great friendship, so it was fine. It probably didn't hurt that I was a good kisser either, she once admitted to me. In exchange for having my back, she was my companion when I needed it, such as when my Aunt Trudy was getting married for the second time. Most of my family had seen her with me so often over the years that they automatically assumed she and I were a couple. Then came the day she turned my world upside down. On a Friday night in July, we went out as a group to celebrate Kat's 18th birthday. We visited 2 dance clubs and had a great time. Kat and I acted like good friends, though not exactly dating partners. I occasionally put my arm around her waist, touched her lightly, and gave her a couple of friendly kisses on the lips. Our group consisted of 10 people, including 2 real couples, and over the course of the evening they began to raise the degree of sexuality. Surprisingly, Kat seemed to be getting more and more aroused. It must have been past midnight before she changed my life. Take me somewhere and make love to me, Julian, she whispered in my ear. We were on the dance floor and doing a slow dance when she said her line. I froze. I stopped dancing and stopped breathing, standing like a statue. Are you sure, Kat? I asked almost in a whisper. Well, I don't want you to feel obligated. She led me by the hand off the dance floor. As we passed our table, she told Becky Hansen that some of the people sitting there would have to find their own way home. Really? She asked. Kat nodded silently. Both girls exchanged smirks. Then Kat led me to the car. I'm confused, Kat, I said, getting behind the wheel. I really want this, but only if you want it as much as I do. What's going on, baby? We can't talk about this right now, Julian. I'm going through something right now, and I don't want to lose that feeling. Do you trust me? She asked. Always. Of course, I replied. I didn't know where we could go, but I knew one neighborhood, located in a cul-de-sac on the north side of town. We were there in 20 minutes. "Back seat now," was all she said. We got in the back seat, and she immediately pressed her face against me, kissing me frantically. We spent the next few minutes exploring each other's tonsils with our tongues before pulling our faces apart. "Take off my clothes. Strip me naked, Julian, then do it, but start easy. I'm still a virgin," she said. "So am I said quietly. It was probably too dark for her to see me blush, but I saw her eyes glaze over with lust before a look of surprise appeared on her face. "Really? I would have thought a handsome guy like you—" "I was waiting for the right girl," I interrupted. "And it's me, despite what you know?" she asked. "Well, you're here," I said, smiling radiantly, and my heart thumped in my chest. "Yes, now kiss me and take your time," she said. Neither of us thought about foreplay. I don't know how long we made love or how long our finishes lasted. All I know is that I came a few minutes later when we were both lying on the seat, my body half lying on top of hers, and we were both breathing heavily. It was several minutes before either of us spoke. "Wow, shit, wow," I muttered. "Yeah, right," she replied. "What was that?" I asked. There was silence for a few long minutes, punctuated only by the sounds of us kissing. "What if I'm wrong, Julian? What if I'm not a lesbian? How am I supposed to find out unless I try to take the road less traveled?" she said. "Anyway, I wanted you to be the first. You're my best friend. You've always been my best friend. I can't imagine a time when you'll stop being my best friend." "Thank you," she added, not paying attention to me. I smirked back. We went to college in the same state, about an hour apart, and being out of the public eye, Kat finally felt free and, she said, was openly dating other women. She showed me pictures of several of her partners, and I had to admit that she had excellent taste in women. I joked that I should ask her to find me a woman who wasn't a lesbian, since she had such good taste. "Don't be a jerk. Find your own hotties, Romeo," she said. We talked at least a couple times a week. Usually they were just friendly conversations, but sometimes we got into more personal topics. Both of us could ask each other questions about sex that we couldn't ask anyone else. It was kind of like being able to get insider information. In addition, we could be frank with each other. Although I realized that college was the first time Kat was able to really engage in homosexuality, I didn't want her to let her life go down the drain and get into trouble. I didn't want her to become a slut, even if she did play for the other team. I cared about her too much to let that happen. "Be careful, Kat. Keep your eyes open. I realize I'm starting to sound like your parents, but only because I care, baby," I said once, turning to her. "It doesn't make any difference who you date, men or women. A whore is still a whore." "Yes, Mom," she answered me defiantly. Kat's parents were stunned when she finally opened up to them over Christmas break her freshman year. To me, she said she was going to tell them the first night after she got back. The next day, her mom called me and asked if I could come over to talk to her and her husband. I had known them forever. They were practically second parents to me. How could I say no to them? "Why didn't you tell us, Julian?" was the first question I was asked when I met them. "You're practically family. How could you not tell us?" Mrs. McVeigh asked. "It's not for me to tell you, and I love Kat too much to go behind her back," I replied. "It was up to her to finally tell you. My job is to support her and watch her back." "I always thought you two would be together someday. I always thought you had something," her mother said. "We were always best friends, but in high school she told me she thought she was gay. I was crushed at first, but then I realized that she could be who she was. I will love her forever, and she knows it. It must have hurt me when she told me we would never be together that way, but at the same time it didn't hurt as much as if there was another guy there," I said. "So it's a date. Was really just an act?" Dad asked. "Both of you, I didn't think her parents needed to know everything, so I just told them what I thought they needed to know. I helped by covering for her on dates, and she paid me back by being my date to certain events. I love her. Always have and always will. I will always have her back no matter what," I said. "That's all we can ask for, Julian." "Thank you," her father said. Throughout college, I went on dates from time to time. I wasn't a monk, but I wasn't looking for a date. Casual hookups were more than enough for me. Kat, on the other hand, by her own admission, dated a lot. I guess she was making up for lost time. In the early fall of her senior year, I arrived at Kat's apartment to visit her over Labor Day weekend. She lived with two other girls in a two-bedroom apartment, and no one objected to me sleeping on the floor of Kat's room, or rather, no one minded until her roommates met me, after which they both offered to share their beds. Kat didn't find it as funny as they did. I blushed appropriately, though I was sure the taller of her two roommates, Alicia, was being completely serious. "Back off, ladies. He's my best friend," Kat said. "Yeah, but you're not going to use him properly," the other roommate, Roxy, picked up on that. Saturday night, the four of us went to a dance club. I had fun dancing with all three women taking turns. I was on the dance floor with Alicia when I saw Kat heading toward the dance floor with a 6-foot-tall goddess with reddish blonde hair, bright green eyes, and legs from her ears. Shit. Kat remained on the floor even after Alicia and I returned to our table with Roxy. Roxy was sitting there with a Cheshire cat grin, watching Kat and the goddess. "Would you look at that? The most beautiful woman in this whole place walks up to Kat and drags her to the floor. I'm not even a lesbian, and I can seriously consider having sex with this woman," Roxy said, her face flushed. "Oh, yeah, that's a hot Amazon," Alicia said. "I'd consider it too." Both women turned their heads and looked at me. "Put me on that list too," I replied. Lauren Sittler looked like the volleyball player she'd been for the first 2 years of college, until she broke her ankle, which ended her career. She and Kat came back to the table hugging each other, and I guessed from Kat's glazed look that she was going to go home with her. She introduced Lauren to everyone at the table, and then leaned over to me to say what I had already guessed. "Is it okay if I catch you tomorrow morning and we have breakfast at IHOP, International House of Pancakes, at 9 o'clock? She giggled. "Sure. I'll make sure Lish and Roxy get home safely," I said. We kissed softly on the lips before she and Lauren left the club. All three of us at the table giggled amongst ourselves as we watched them leave. "Wait a minute. She didn't tell us you couldn't be in our bed tonight," Alicia said. "Do you think it's an oversight, or—" By the way, that night was the first and only threesome I ever had. Alicia had a queen-size bed, and the three of us didn't settle down until about 3 in the morning. The girls let me use their shower so I could at least wash off the smell of our glorious night of debauchery and recover a bit. I kissed Alicia and Roxy goodbye, and at 8:55 I was already waiting for Kat at IHOP, sipping coffee. She walked in at 9 o'clock, accompanied by Lauren. They were smiling and giggling like schoolgirls. "I hope you don't mind that I invited Lauren," Kat said shyly. "I hope Alicia and Roxy took good care of you last night." The last one was more of an affirmation than a question. It was my turn to be shy. Kat and Lauren got jobs in the same city, and after graduation they moved to live together. I was happy for them and told them so. Over the next 10 years, I visited them several times, and about as often they came to visit me. My love life didn't work out as well as Kat's. I had a few girlfriends, but nothing promising until Lily Hanlon came into my life 5 years after high school graduation. I was a member of the local YMCA, Young Men's Christian Association, and went there 3 times a week to work out at the gym. Every once in a while, I would wander into the gym, grab a loose basketball, and take a few shots to stretch my muscles. There were 6 courts at the Y, and games were being played on all but the one I played on. A woman a few years younger than me came up, leading the ball, and asked if I would mind if she left it in my basket. I said yes, and soon she was already putting the ball in the hoop like she was Damian Lillard. When she started hitting 3-pointers, I stopped throwing and started watching. She noticed I was watching her and started adding some words and sound effects like deuce or 3, bang or bam. I smiled, admiring her tosses and sass. "Would you like to play horse, 2-person basketball?" With a smirk, she asked. I'd been a pretty good player in my day, but I was at least a few years past my prime, and I knew it. And horse was all about shot-making skills, and after all, I was known as the king of unreliable shots, at least in my mind. I agreed. She started and made 3 long throws in a row, only 2 of which I would be able to repeat, so I drained the first X pretty quickly. Then she missed her next throw, and it was my turn to throw first. I turned to my right side and, to her surprise, made the throw with my left hand. "That was impromptu, wasn't it? You've made other throws with your right hand," she said. "Uh-huh. You do it now," I smiled. She missed that one, and I did the next two with my left. She made a grimace. "Come on, cheapskate, do something normal," she whimpered. "Cheap? Why? Because I can use my left hand and you can't?" I chuckled. "How about you do something normal?" I walked to the free throw line and made the shot with both hands, in the style of the famous NBA player Rick Barry. She looked dumbfounded. "Really?" she said almost mournfully. I nodded silently. She sighed, then blundered away, only one letter separating her from defeat. She looked very upset, her big brown eyes moist with disappointment. "Yeah, I know. How can you lose to that wannabe?" I said, my smile growing wider by the second. "I'm one of them. Nothing outstanding, but I have skills. Strange skills, but skills nonetheless. A decent athlete, but not great. A little brains, a little common sense, but not a Harvard guy." "Just make your last throw and put me out of my misery," she growled. "I'll tell you what, if I win, you agree to have dinner with me tomorrow night. At Applebee's, nothing fancy, so you don't even have to consider it a date. Do we have a deal?" I asked. She thought for a second, then looked confused. She finally guessed I was playing a joke on her. She smiled and giggled. "Deal," she said, tossing me the ball. I barely glanced at the basket because I knew where I was on the court. Anyone who played a lot of ball in the schoolyard could do that. Then I made my left 5-meter shot. She picked up the ball after it skipped through the hoop and moved to where I was still standing with my arm raised. I took a step to my left. She came toward me, made another awkward left-handed throw, and whispered, "Applebee's is yours, stud. Damn, you're an insufferable asshole, you know that?" "Actually, I do. I'm Julian Leonard, by the way," I said. "Lily Hanlon." "Too bad, loser," she said tautly. "Oh, too bad. Well, maybe tomorrow night I'll be able to change your mind," I said. The next night I managed to change her mind, and she agreed to a real date on Friday night. Turns out she's 23 years old, a college graduate, and works in human resources at an auto parts company. She's smart, literate, likes to flirt, and is also a pretty good athlete. We quickly felt a liking for each other, and after the first month of dating, we became exclusive. With a woman named Kat, I'd never had that connection before. The only obvious downside was her tendency to flirt. We talked about exclusivity and fidelity, and several times we discussed her flirting and where I felt the line needed to be drawn. She insisted that it was all fun, and I replied that it wasn't fun for me. Several times we fought about it, and she always promised she would try harder. Then we would end up in bed and have amazing reconciliatory sex. I knew she was manipulating me with sex, but I really did feel that she loved me, and I was definitely falling hard for her. About 6 months after we became a couple, I took her on a long weekend with Kat and Lauren. I had long ago explained to her what I had with Kat, and Kat and Lauren had told her all about Lily. Thought the weekend went well, and I thought all the women got along quite well. What's more, several times when I entered the room, the conversation between them would stop and the giggling would start. I took that as a good sign that they were bonding, even if it did seem like they were conspiring against me. Kat was expecting my call when she answered on Monday night after our weekend get-together. As my best friend, she also knew exactly the reason for my call. "I like her a lot, Julian. I think she could be the girl for you. Lauren likes her too, but Lauren noticed something that I missed. Lauren says that when we were at the dance club last night, she was a little flirty. I took it as enthusiasm, but Lauren seemed a little over the top. You know she loves you as much as I do and was paying attention too," Kat said. "Thanks for your opinion, babe. That's exactly what I wanted and needed to hear," I said. 3 months later, I asked Lily to marry me, and she agreed. The wedding was set for about a year later. Before I proposed to her, I met with Lily's parents several times. They seemed nice enough, although I realized her father didn't think I was good enough to marry his daughter. Her father told me not to worry about it, as it was just dad stuff, and I would experience such a thing someday if I had a daughter. I tried to ignore it, but I felt like he disrespected me for having my hands growing out of the wrong place. I know it sounds crazy, but Lily's father owns a pretty successful construction company, and both his son and son-in-law work for him. I'm a mid-level accountant and not much use for DIY projects. Putting aside the fact that the three of them can barely count to 100, I'm no good simply because I can't craft. The wedding was going to be a pretty big event in her parents' hometown, which was about 2 hours away from where we lived. It was also where Lily was going to have her bachelorette party 2 weeks before the wedding. The bachelorette party was organized by her sister Willie, a married friend of the bride at the wedding, and the rest of the bridesmaids. Lily had said there would be 15 of them, so they had gotten 5 rooms at the Hilton Hotel in town, figuring they would be too drunk to drive home. I said I thought that was reasonable. Since I was to be alone that evening, I decided to treat myself to a bottle of Angel's Envy Rye, a truly top-notch whiskey, and 2 of my favorite movies of all time, Jeremiah Johnson and the original Rollerball. It was a great evening. I wasn't too drunk when I passed out a little after midnight. After waking up with a slight hangover around 6 a.m., I decided to take an aspirin and go back to bed. But then a mischievous thought struck me. I figured there would be quite a few hungover women in the hotel this morning amongst Lily and the others, and it would be a bit amusing to see what the alcohol had done last night. I knew they were supposed to meet for breakfast at 9 and decided to show up too. I took a quick shower and hit the road. I actually arrived a few minutes early and was standing on the sidelines when Willie and about 8 other women dragged in for breakfast. Lily wasn't among them. I assumed she was very well stuffed. I waited a few minutes before approaching the chattering, hungover bunch. "Is Lily out of it that she didn't even come out to breakfast with you this morning?" I asked with a wide grin. 9 heads turned quickly in my direction, and I found that I was the only one smiling. "God, please, no." "What room is she in? I know you girls are supposed to have rooms 201 through 205. "Damn it, which one is she in?" I shouted. One of the women started to rise, as did my blood pressure. "Freeze! None of you move!" I shouted. The woman sat back down. They started talking incoherently among themselves. I walked to the elevator and went up to the 2nd floor. It didn't take good hearing to realize what was going on in room 205. I turned around and walked out of the hotel, tears of anger and frustration flowing from my eyes. For most of the 2-hour drive home, I contemplated turning around and killing myself. I had absolutely not seen this coming. I didn't know who it was or why. I just knew the wedding was off. I guess I was lucky I found out sooner rather than later. When I got home, the first thing I did was call Kat, who was supposed to be my female best man, and Lauren, and told them my sad story. Then I called my parents. God bless my mom. She volunteered to call 28 guests from our side of the family and let them know that the wedding was off. Since Kat already knew everything, I only had to call Robert and Jimmy, my 2 best men. Besides feeling bad about what had happened, I was stunned that I still hadn't heard from Lily in the middle of the day. I decided that since I wasn't the one who cheated, I didn't need to call. On Sunday around noon, Lily showed up at my door with a very remorseful look on her face, looking like she was about to cry when I opened the door and let her in. "I'm so sorry in ways I'll never be able to put into words," she said, sitting down on my couch. "I got carried away with the party and lost my head," she said. "Is that what you call losing your head?" I asked. "And how many times have you lost your head?" She blushed deeply and lowered her eyes, then gradually raised them to me. "Only once the night before, and then again in the morning," she whispered. "Okay, now the hard question. Why did you lose your head?" "Am I not enough for you?" I asked. "Like I said, I just lost my head. Drank too much, and I lost my head. He was handsome. Just—" "Don't go on or I'll beat the shit out of you," I interrupted. "I've never hit a girl before, but this makes me want to do it for the first time. And who is this asshole anyway?" He's just some guy. He didn't mean anything to me," she said. "Yeah? Well, he meant a lot to me. In fact, he meant the end of us," I stated. "No, we can't do that. Everything is ready for the wedding. My parents have already paid a fortune," she said. Not my problem. I'm not the one who slept with someone who isn't my fiancé, I stated. Oh, come on. We're not even married yet, she whined. Exactly, and we won't be, I said. You know my father's going to kill you, don't you? She asked. Not when he finds out you spread your legs. If anything, I think he owes me an apology, I said. Uh, e, she mumbled. That's what I thought, I snorted. I hadn't heard from Lily's father, so I assumed she was telling the truth about what happened. The weekend I was supposed to get married, Kat and Lauren were staying with me. They just showed up unannounced on Friday night, right after I got home from work. We already had the weekend booked, and we didn't want you to sit here alone and drown your sorrows alone. Now you can drown them with us, but you're buying, Kat said as they showed up at my apartment door. We didn't drink ourselves into oblivion that night, but I know that both of those women got me drunk enough that I slept well that night. In fact, I slept so well that I didn't wake up until 9:30 the next morning. Lauren was sitting at the table drinking coffee and reading the paper when I staggered into the kitchen wearing only gym shorts and a t-shirt. The bathroom and guest bedroom doors were open, but Kat was neither seen nor heard. Hey, where's the onion woe this morning? She's not usually up early on Saturday, I said. Lauren nodded, but I noticed a smirk playing on her lips. She has a case, Lauren said quietly, not looking me in the eye. Spit it out, giraffe woman. I can see in your eyes that you want to tell me something, I said, making toast for my coffee. She needs to return something to your ex-fiancé, Lauren said, and her smirk turned into a full-fledged smile. I wouldn't like that, would I? I asked quietly. You know her as well as I do, and what do you think? I shuddered. I showered and cleaned myself up when an hour later, Kat smugly walked into my apartment with a box of Dunkin' Donuts. I just needed something special for the morning, she said. I smiled incredulously. She shrugged. He knows everything. He guessed it himself. I didn't say anything, honestly, Lauren said, and smiled guiltily. Okay, tell me already, you really want to, I grinned. I called your ex and told her I needed to return something, she began. We met at the park near the donut shop. When she approached, I opened my arms for a hug. I don't think she saw my right fist until it hit her left eye. She went down like a sack of bricks. I'll be upset if that bruise goes away before 2 weeks. She strutted around the kitchen with her fist in the air like a boxing champion. Lauren and I laughed heartily. Damn, didn't that dumb bitch remember what I told her about your character and your right arm? I asked. I hadn't been on a date in almost a year. It just wasn't that important to me. I think my loneliness was affecting Kat and Lauren more than it was affecting me. After about 6 months, they tried to set me up with one of their single friends when I went to visit them. They weren't tactful about it, but at least the women they tried to set me up with were sexy. I ended up in bed with a couple of them, but most of the women were one-on-one, and that was it. I'm just not ready, girls. Give it up, please, I said to a couple after one of the dates. But I have to say, you both find some damn beautiful women for me. Lauren's ability to find good-looking women worked against Kat after 5 years. She found herself a 22-year-old senior art student at a local small college and ended her 12-year relationship with Kat. According to Kat, she found out when, coming home from work one day, she found Lauren and her new love sitting on the couch waiting for Kat. That's how? Just like that? Kat asked the duo. Apparently, Lauren's new favorite was very excitable, and at one point in the discussion, she jumped up from the couch and quickly walked over to Kat. Lauren couldn't stop her in time, and 2 punches later, the girl's nose was broken, her lips smashed, and she was lying on the floor. Did you have to hit her, Kat? Lauren screamed. I don't know, but I wanted to, Kat replied. You could have warned her, bitch. Kat laughed through her tears as she told me the story over the phone. I'm sorry, baby. From a distance, it seemed like everything was fine between you two, I said. You know, I bet someday in the future, when they finally allow same-sex marriage, they'll find out that the divorce rate among same-sex couples will be just as high as among hetero couples, Kat said. I don't doubt that for a minute, I agreed. Over the next few months, Kat and I spent a lot of time together. That's what you do for the ones you love. I knew she would never reciprocate my feelings for her, but in my mind, she would always be something more than a best friend, something between family and... We were sitting in a nice restaurant finishing up a delicious dinner. Without thinking, I reached for her left hand that was resting on the table. I took her hand, held it briefly, then stroked the back of it, putting it back. "I'm sorry, Julian, that I'm not as good a friend to you as you are a friend to me," she said quietly. "I realize that you want so much more from me, but you accept the fact that I can't give it, and you don't insist. You would be the man of my dreams, if I dreamed of men." I blushed and lowered my eyes. "Not to say completely disinterested," I replied. "You know there will always be a part of me that hopes." "Oh, shit. Let's get out of here and do something stupid. I think 2 killer hangovers would be appropriate," she said. In her mid-30s, Kat was still a beautiful woman. It was only a matter of time before she wanted to get back into the sea of dating. Even though Kat and I had only been dating once a month, to me, she suddenly looked something different. A little more tired, maybe a few wrinkles on her face, and I'd swear she'd lost about 4.5 pounds of weight, and not to say she needed it. "Hi, are you feeling okay?" I asked her one Saturday afternoon as we lay slumped on my couch watching an NCAA, National Collegiate Athletic Association, softball game. She looked at me strangely. "Well, I've been really tired lately," she admitted. "I thought maybe I should add more cardio to my workouts. You know, I'm going to be 40 next year. That means you, my friend, will be 40 next year. Man, I suddenly feel old." And I talked her into going to the doctor for a physical. Hell, she hadn't had a physical since Lauren dumped her. The doctor couldn't see her until a month later, but I marked the date on my calendar. Called her the next day. She gave me vague answers. Finally, she said she would be scheduled for more tests in 2 weeks. I know I was more concerned than she was. "Damn, you're as pushy as my mom," she said, trying to make a joke. Colon cancer is no joke. Doctors noted that since the cancer was detected fairly early, the chances of beating it were high, although they said it might not be easy. I was fortunate to be diagnosed just after tax season, so thanks to accumulated vacation days and being able to work outside of the office, I was able to be around Kat often. I drove her to many doctor appointments, chemotherapy sessions, and various other appointments. I also interviewed and hired a specialist who could look after Kat when I couldn't be around. At times, her parents stayed with her as well. She was on disability because she had to quit her job. Her parents and I paid her bills. The chemo affected Kat in the form of nausea, fatigue, and some hair loss. Yes, she had bad days both physically and mentally, but the tough girl I grew up with fought hard. I expected nothing less from her, and didn't let her give up on those hard days. Some of those days we fought because I wasn't going to let her feel sorry for herself. "You're a son of a bitch! You're hurting me! Give me a break once in a while!" she yelled at me once when she wanted to skip chemo. "No way, you little wimp!" I yelled back. "Now get in the damn car yourself, or I'm going to put you in the damn trunk and drive you there like luggage." She staggered out to the car, smoke practically coming out of her ears. She didn't speak to me the whole way, only whispered once. "I hate you, asshole." "I hate you too," I whispered back, trying not to smile. A few months later, as we had hoped, the worst was over, and we were once again sitting snuggled together on her couch, as was our custom. "Why, Julian?" she asked. "You know the answer to that, Kat. I love you. Always have, always will. There's no need for reciprocity. No pressure," I replied. 6 months later, Kat got the good news. The doctors announced that she was cancer-free. My parents and I took her out to a great restaurant to celebrate. There were many tears. 2 nights later, she and I were lying on her couch again when she took my head in both hands and looked at me, almost literally nose to nose. She dug her lips into mine in what I thought was a deep, sensual kiss. I was, to say the least, mesmerized. "Did you feel that?" she asked. I was confused for a brief second, but then I felt like I'd been hit in the face with a shovel. Yes, I did," I persisted. She nestled her lips against mine again, and this time I participated as well. We repeated this a few more times over the next few minutes before she pulled my shirt over my head. We kissed some more, after which she unbuttoned my jeans and lowered the zipper. I took both of her hands in mine and stopped her. "Are you sure about this?" "Completely sure," I whispered. "More sure than I've ever been in my life," she whispered back. We stripped each other in seconds, stopping only to kiss in between removing our clothes. "I love you, Julian. I can feel it. I feel it. Maybe I'm a little slow, but I love you. I love you. I love you. I've been a fool. I've wasted so much time. I can't waste any more of it. Will you marry me, Julian?" I stuttered, my blood pressure soaring with my heart. Still, I had to be sure this wasn't just her thanks for my help during my illness. "Are you sure, baby?" "I didn't think my equipment was right for you," I said. "It's not about the equipment, Julian. It's about the connection. Do you know how sexy it is when someone loves you that much?" she asked. "No, I don't," I started to say before she interrupted me. "Well, you're about to find out, mister. From now on, if you let me, I'll show it to you every day," she said. "So?" "You know I can never say no to you," I said. We had a small wedding with my parents and my sister, her parents, and a few close friends. She moved into my apartment and eventually found a part-time job. She didn't need to work, but she wanted to. If she asked, I would carry her in my arms to and from home. In our early 40s, Kat and I were no longer the physical specimens we had been 20 years earlier, but we didn't need to be. We could still make the bed shake sometimes, but more often than not, we made sweet, soulful love. She taught me something new. I taught her something new. We were almost like children in that respect. God, we giggled and laughed a lot. "It's not a competition, Julian. I don't keep track of how many finishes you deliver to me," she said one night after I'd turned her on dozens of times. "And I'm not complaining, you animal." In fact, our relationship wasn't just physical. She'd always been my best friend, and life as husband and wife hadn't changed a thing. We still spent almost all of our time together, finishing each other's sentences and arguing like 5-year-olds over who was the best player in MLB, Major League Baseball, Steve Trout or Shohei Ohtani. Oh yeah, I also never gave her a reason to hit me again. Still hadn't forgotten that first and only time so many years ago, and didn't want a repeat. We had returned from a 2-week trip to Australia and New Zealand for our 9th wedding anniversary, and it had been about 10 days when I heard Kat vomiting in the bathroom again. It seemed to happen every day after we returned, and I worried that she had caught some kind of disease in the southern hemisphere. She tried to tell me that she had an ulcer from talking to me too much, but I didn't fall for it. 2 weeks later, she did go to the doctor, and after some tests and x-rays, the doctor said that the x-rays showed a small mass in her stomach. Given that she had a history of colon cancer, the doctor scheduled her for surgery to investigate. She was to have the mass removed and a biopsy taken. She and her doctor didn't seem too concerned. I, on the other hand, was terrified. Dr. Magnus Rostowski looked more like an Olympic weightlifter than a world-class oncologist. He was only 5'8", but his physique was like a fire hydrant on steroids. He'd shown no emotion the few times I'd brought Kat to him, but that wasn't the case when he came out to me in the waiting room after the biopsy. A doctor with tears in his eyes is not a good sign. "We didn't do the biopsy. They found cancer everywhere after the autopsy. I'm sorry, Mr. Leonard," Dr. Rostowski said. Kat was officially diagnosed with stomach cancer. Dr. Rostowski gave her 6 to 9 months to live. Chemotherapy was impossible because the cancer was too advanced, the doctor told us. Under normal circumstances, I was a calm person and Kat was testy, but these circumstances were unusual. I was angry. Hell, I was mad as hell. Kat, on the other hand, was unusually calm and resigned to her fate. "How can you be so damn calm?" I shouted. "It's not fair." "No, it wouldn't be fair if I didn't finally see what a wonderful man you are and marry you. We've had 9 wonderful years, haven't we?" she replied. "You know, sometimes you really piss me off," I said. "I should know," she chuckled. "Cancer is a bitch and doesn't respect anything, much less a life expectancy estimate from a top oncologist. Kat hadn't lived 9 months, not even close to 6. She barely made it to 9 weeks. The greedy part of me wanted more, much more, but the loving part of me couldn't watch her suffer a single day longer. Soon after the surgery, severe pain set in, and she spent most of the next few weeks in a narcotic-like stupor. "I'm sorry, baby." You waited so long for me, and now I'm leaving early, she said through tears on her last night. I need a favor, Cat, one favor, wait for me, and save a place for me beside you. Promise, Cat, I said. I promise, Julian. Give me a hug, baby. Give me a hug, please. She had lost weight and barely had room in the middle of the bed. I moved to the side of the bed where there were no wires or bottles and gently moved over to her, gently enclosing her in a hug. I kissed her gently on the lips and held her like that until she collapsed. She was 51 years old. About 30 minutes from our house, in a rural area, there is a small cemetery. It sits on a small flat area that overlooks a beautiful cornfield. An oak tree grows on the side of it, giving shade to Kat's grave in the early afternoon, while the field below is flooded with bright sunlight. Kat and I found this cemetery one sunny Sunday afternoon while driving through the countryside, a few years after we were married. We wandered around it for a long time, looking at the various graves, some of which dated back to the mid-1800s. We were in the shade of the trees when she pointed to the sun-drenched cornfield below. It's beautiful, Julian. We should vacation here someday, she said. I promised her we would.